Hey, what's going on? Happy Sunday, Lying Off Academy members and guests. Just jumping on. A good thing the Dodger game wasn't that close because we might have to delay the stream, but Dodgers are taking care of business. Any Dodger fans in here, you're happy to be amongst friends. LJ, Larry, you can learn more in one episode of these swing reviews and anything else online. I appreciate that, man. My goal is to help educate those who just, either don't have the luxury of taking lessons or don't have the time. Quite honestly, it takes a lot of effort to work with a pro. So I appreciate your support. Appreciate everybody being here. We got a big show tonight. We've got probably 6 or 7 people to look at. I'm going to try my best to get through them fairly quick, and also try and hit everybody's questions they do have. What's up, Eric? How you doing, man? Thanks for joining on. Appreciate you coming up every week. Let's go Mets. Oh man, I don't know. Shouldn't have said that, Larry. Eric, you sent me a video. You might not get the good analysis from me. I'm just playing. Still waiting for video though, Eric. All right. So first of all, I want to go over a subject. Somebody sent this to me, and I believe he's watching. So let me just make sure I find it here. There's questions about wrist hinge. Let me see. Where is it? Okay, I don't know if I can find it. Basically, it was about wrist hinge, and at the top of your swing, where should your face angle be, related to your wrist angle as well, and a subject about bowing and cupping came up, and there was a lot of confusion of what is correct. Yeah, thanks, Larry. You got it, buddy. What was correct? It was a cupping or bowing, and quite honestly, you look at the best in the world, and he put up a couple of videos of the best in the world and how they contradict each other. You have pros that that bow at the very top, and you have pros that cup at the very top, and that directly affects their face angle. However, true bowing and cupping does not open and close the club face. It adds loft and de-lofts your club. So those that bow typically de-loft their club. It has nothing really to do with closing the club face. Now, the club face position at the top is directly attributed to grip placements, how you rotate your forearms. Are you more of a body-oriented golfer, or are you more of a hands-oriented golfer? Now, if you're more of a hands-oriented golfer, you tend to see more open club faces at the top. If you're more of a body-oriented golfer, you tend to see more square club faces. If they are closed, I have taught students that actually work the other way. Most students, the average student, typically opens to closes the club face in their golf swing. It's just more comfortable. It's how the body works. As you turn, it's easier to roll a club face open and close. I've had students that close the club face and then open it at impact. So they do it a little bit backwards. The bottom line is there's no right or wrong way to do it. Now, the problem is if you're looking at the best in the world, you're talking about the upper epsilon of anything. You're looking at the freaks of nature, and I don't want you to try and compare yourself to these freaks of nature. Basically, you guys are elephants and they're lions. You guys both are out in the jungle. You guys are both surviving the golf course, but they're on a different breed. And they're hunters, they're killers, and you guys are just picking up the leaves off the trees when you hit your ball in the trees. But you'll never be a lion, and they have been elephants, and they were able to get to lions. I guess what I'm trying to get at is you can fall down a rabbit hole and start to pinpoint so many little things to try and emulate others. I would suggest you shy away from that and realize your potential. And your potential right now is an elephant, and you have to become a better elephant. And don't try to look at becoming a lion. Bottom line, you have to have a club face that suits your body style. If you're able to rotate more, you can get away with having a squarer club face because that promotes power from the body to square the club face. So basically, I can square the club face with my hands only. So if I go like this, I don't move my body, I can open and close the club face pretty easily. My width of arc is very narrow because I don't have a lot of turn. But if I enact a lot of turn, I can now keep my club face relatively square to my turn and allow my turn to hit the golf ball for me. That is very hard to do. And we do see that in the long drive competitors where they enact a lot of turn. Now, the cool thing about long drive competitors is they're the best of both worlds. They take an immense amount of turn, plus they use their hands and arms. So that's why they're so erratic. That's why they get 5 shots and they can maybe hit 1 in the fairway. The other 4 all over the place because they're pushing things to the extreme. So to try and shrink down your answer, Landry, I hope I at least gave you some idea of your question. It's so individualized that you have to look at your face angle and why your face angle is in a position it is, and then relate it back to your body mobility and relate it back to your grip alignment, set of posture. Everything is always evolves and revolves around your basic fundamentals. So hopefully, Landry, that takes care of that. If you need further explanations, let me know. It's not a cop-out or anything, but it's just a hard question to answer without looking at your swing. So if you want to send me your swing, I can look at your swing, look at your face angle, look at your body rotation, and figure out, hey, based on your misses, is this a good thing? So first on the screen, we have a student here that's questioning if they are over the top. So a good question here, and we'll see. Let's draw some basic lines here. We're not going to go too crazy because we got so much stuff to try to get through tonight. And let's just take a look over the top. We're going to watch. Great. So the camera just don't you hate that? It's like you get ready to paint and the whole thing moves. Okay, now let's redraw this. Okay, flattening of the shoulders. It's not necessarily over the top. Your shoulders definitely flatten out, which can cause some issues. And for those of you wondering what I'm talking about, so there's the spine angle, and his upper plane line is actually perpendicular to that spine angle. So that's pretty good with that setup. But if you take a look at the shoulders, they definitely do come up, and that's going to affect the hands at the top of your swing. So the hands get much lower as a result. I wouldn't say you're over the top. I mean, on the contrary, you might be your hand plane might be slightly steep, but your shaft, your shaft is nowhere near over the top. It comes on right on down. All in all, I think it's a pretty decent motion. But to answer your question, no, you're not over the top. True over the top with a driver, you'll see that shaft be much steeper, and you'll see a lot of pop-ups. You'll see a lot of pulls, a lot of rope hooks, specifically if you have fast hands, or you just see banana balls. So if you do face any of those, let me know and we can address it. But no, you are not over the top. Number 2, why am I hitting it on the heel? So let's take a look at this one. Got to zoom in a little bit here, and I can kind of make out where you are. All right, so we got to look at the pixels. Which pixel are we going to look at? All right, yeah, so I see a slight, that now this one's a little bit more steeper than the one we saw last time. Same sort of thing, the rocking of the shoulders, we see them flattening out, and then they try to gain their tilt again, and that causes a lot of kind of almost leaning into it, and it's going to be hard to tell from without a face on, but I've seen enough swings now where I know what is happening here. And again, this is good to watch this, even if it's not your swing, because you can probably see some things that you do in your golf swing and relate it back to what we're trying to cover here. So there's that spine angle, and we put a little back brace line. Let's check his centeredness real quick. So a little bit behind, a little heel-based swing. Typically, heel-based swings have a tough time turning, and the one reason is if you get too much weight on your heels, you're so stacked on your heels that when you start to turn, you fall back, and you don't want to fall. So your body says, I don't want to fall. So I see heel-based players typically get disconnected pretty quick, and their hands take over. But you do a pretty decent job of turning. You can see the arms on the lower plane line. You get to the top plane line slightly lower than what you should do. And again, this is just a loss of shoulder tilt. So we can see your right shoulder is coming a little bit too high, so you come out of your posture. So it could be because you're starting a little bit too bent over for your body makeup, that your body, in order to get some turn, it's hard to stay in that posture. It's hard to get that right shoulder down enough to stay relative to your shoulder bend, which is that long red line. So you might feel the need to kind of stand out of your posture to facilitate more turn. And that could come at some positives and negatives. One of the negatives is your hands get a little bit too low, so they don't quite get to that secondary plane line. Your hands do get it deep enough, obviously, because they're much lower. But the problem now is because you have eliminated your stretch. Once you come out of your posture. So if I'm a righty, if my left shoulder comes up, I can now turn a lot more because I come out of my posture and I become more upright. Now, when you turn a lot more, now your length of arc increases so much and also momentum. So when you take that club back, the club head starts to pick up weight because momentum's pulling that club back. And all of a sudden, you can go so far back. And we can see he does go pretty far back. You can see the club head peer out back over here. So this is a severe disconnection. And now his first move, and you'll notice that this right shoulder will drop straight down to try and find that original setup. So it's just that slight motion. Now all of a sudden your club is a little steeper. So this is borderline over the top. And you can see unless he comes up with some sort of correction, there's an issue. We can also see that the hands are affected as well. So if we go to the top and we draw his triangle, basically his hands would like to go at the bare minimum down that center point. Good players, tour players, you see their hands drop on this right side. Excuse me, let me get some arrows here so we don't confuse you. So tour players, you get to see their hands pull down in that right line. Good players, scratch golfers all the way to maybe single digits, you can see their hands pulling down that center line. Everybody else, you see their hands veer out to this side of the triangle, and that's not a good side to veer out. So you can see your first move, look at those hands. Those hands are veering out the wrong side of the triangle. This is coming from you rerouting your shoulder tilt. Now to bring your hands higher. And also when you reroute your shoulder tilt, I'm guessing you're leaning forward. Your spine angle at impact is more like a driver. So you're probably very steep, specifically with this club. And obviously that's going to change your path of your hands. And you could hit it on the toe, you could hit it on the heel, but there's a lot of issues with your stability revolving around your setup. So if this was me, and this is a student of mine, one of the first things that I would probably get him to help out with is changing his setup. So less of the feet under the chest and more the feet under the hips. So we could accommodate that by standing a little bit taller, pulling the feet back a little bit. So when he gets to the top of his swing, this is probably what the angle I would be working with him on is there. I'd say, okay, you get there naturally, so let's start you there. So I would build his swing, his setup around this. And if we go to the start of the swing, we can see it's not quite in that setup. So compensations are peculiar, specifically if I don't know what their misses are, and we're missing some of that information here. So hope that helps you. And if you are watching this, I think he's on New York time, so he's probably watching the Mets lose. And he's probably a Yankee fan if he's from New York, but if he's watching the Mets lose, I apologize, but it is a 7-game series. And hopefully you'll see this in the recording. Next up, we have a user just says, how is this swing? So let's take a look at this swing and give him some constructive criticism. Okay, I see. I'm not sure how long you've been playing. I do see some disconnection, lack of rotation, and you look fairly young enough where I don't think it should be an issue for you to rotate. So what I immediately suggest off the bat is getting some lower body rotation. You can see kind of lock up at the very top here, which does affect some things. So let's just take a look at a couple of areas. So when you are doing your own swing at home, what I suggest you do is, and this is Swing Catalyst I use. They have a free version, and I think you can still draw the same lines. This thing cost me $10 a month. So if you want to invest in anything for yourself, they're not sponsoring me or anything like that. I just use Swing Catalyst. It's very basic. You can draw the lines. You see the lines I draw. You can use it on your own swing. You can kind of figure out your cause and effect. And if you have any questions, just send me the video and we'll go over them on Sundays. But basically what you're looking for is I've always drawn lower plane line and upper plane line. And it stems from the top of your shoulder and it's parallel to your lower plane line. And this is where you have to work with. As long as you are reasonable distance from each other, that's fine. And then I draw a back brace line just to check any spine angle loss. And to assist with that back brace line, we also draw a Barney Purple line. And yes, you have to use Barney Purple for this one, or else your computer blows up. And then at the very bottom, we have to draw a centeredness check. So it's harder unless you get the camera right on your foot line, because most of us take it on the ball line, and then it skews our perception. So as long as, you can kind of guesstimate where your arches of your heels are, bring it straight up to the sky. And we can see this is a pretty nice setup. It's a very stable setup from what I see. So there shouldn't be any posture loss based on this swing. Excuse me, the setup. Now, the swing itself could cause some posture loss. We have to look at what is causing that. So we see as he takes that club back, we see a slight initial rotation, more of the hands picking up. Club face is squared to his spine angle, which is okay, but you see the weighting is going towards his toes, maybe because there's a lack of turn. So if you don't turn your hips enough, the weight doesn't distribute enough correctly to this area back here. And then all of a sudden, the turn of the shoulders pulls you down, and we can see his shoulder tilt. Let's see if his shoulder tilt's getting a little bit down. So he's starting to lose a little bit shoulder tilt into the golf ball, pulls his weight to his toes, and from here his hands get higher, which is a compensatory thing from the increase of the tilt. We see when you decrease the tilt, the hands get lower. Increasing the tilt, the hands get higher. So we see those hands get much higher. They can't get to the centeredness check. So at the top of your swing, the bare minimum here is that butt of the club should be at the centeredness of your golf swing, because that's how a golf swing can become more repeatable. I hope that I use that word correctly. But now, if he is a good player, he will figure out a way to get this club head, the grip of the club behind that line. And that's usually where we see the rerouting of the really good tour players. You see their hands reroute first, and then they connect to their body and then rotate through. So there's a good start here, but the lack of turn caused some issues already. And from here, we're fighting steepness. We do that triangle check, and we can see, based on this, the hands should bare minimum, just like we talked about a little bit earlier, they should bare minimum go down that line. And we can see they're just slightly towards the wrong line. So we have a steepness issue. Once it's steep, there's no motion through. Then we go ahead and drive up. We start to lose some of our posture because we run out of room. Sorry about all these lines. And then we get a little bit flippy at the end to try and get our hands back over. So that flippiness shows me that you are an athlete. At least you have good hand-eye coordination, but you can see the weighting. I mean, look at the weighting is way too far over here. You've run out of room. You've crashed into the golf ball. The weighting should be back over here so you can push off to that back left heel. So I think this all stems from a really good starting position, but the lack of hip turn pulls your centeredness too close to your toes, and now you're trapped. So for you, if you start from the beginning, just get used to this right hip moving back as you take that club back. And as a result, those hands will stay much lower on that lower plane line until about midway points, and then they'll come up naturally and then just get below that upper plane line. I would imagine that would help you immensely, just that first little hip rotation. Landry, can you show a video of a swing where someone does maintain perfect shoulder tilt throughout the top of the backswing? Perhaps in this not very, for sure. If bottom line, Landry, if you take a look at any tour pro, let's say majority, let's call it 90% of the tour pros, their shoulder tilt remains right there. And it all has to do, and if you look at my last video, we talked about the 10 strangest swings in golf and how they still work. Every one of those swings, besides Calvin Peete, he's the only one that lost a little bit of swing posture. But even the funkiest swings, they maintain their posture. And it has to do with weight distribution, correct setup, and the shoulder tilt. People overlook that shoulder tilt. If the shoulder tilt starts rocking too much under, something has to give. Usually the hip tilt gives out, the weight distribution gives out, that you can't load correctly. So any tour pro, Landry, just look at that, and you know what to look for now, and you'll be amazed at what they share in common. They don't share hand positions, they don't share hand path, they don't share club face positions in common. That's all individualized, but what they do share in common is a solid setup, and they utilize that setup correctly by turning and tilting in accordance with that setup. So that is the key to any good golf swing. Hope that helps you. Student number 3, don't know your name, so you're S3. Next up. All right, this one is going to be a fun one. I've been going back and forth with some emails on this one, and I pulled up his answers, and I want to share this with everybody just to show you what we're dealing with here. Okay, so I asked him a few questions. How long have you been playing? What is your practice to play percentage? What are you working on now? Do you have a golf swing video from a year or two ago? I like to see those just to see what has changed. What are your misses? Do you miss both sides? And how is your contact when you do miss it? That's very important. Golf is not a game of good shots. I care about how you miss it and what are your misses. Any body limitations? And lastly, do you take lessons currently? And if so, what are you working on at this moment in your lesson journey? I hope Philip, I hope you're on watching. But if not, you'll see this in the replay and give me your feedback. His answers, he's been playing for about 15 years, but seriously, for about 5. He warms up 15 minutes before he plays golf. So there's something with 15, right? So maybe at 20 years of playing, it'll be 20 minutes of practice. I have 2 kids now, so no time to practice. I totally get that. And this is why I do this channel, because of people like you and me that have a job and have responsibilities. We can't sit there and dedicate 20 hours a week to practicing. Working on consistency, he's down to a 2 handicap. That's really impressive. So 15 years playing, seriously for 5, doesn't have time to pray or practice, and he's down to a 2. That's very impressive. Now just looking to have good ball striking every time I play. This is the only video he has. He hits a slight draw and a block right or outright slice that starts right and goes even more right when I miss. So there's a 2-way miss here. Most of us have 2-way misses. The tour guys and girls, on occasion, on a very rare occasion, you'll see a 2-way miss, but most of them just have a 1-way miss, and that's why they're on tour. None. So body limitations, no, but he's in his 30s, back getting sore. I feel you there. No lessons, just YouTube videos and trying stuff to see what works. Okay, so with all that said, this is actually, I saw this video. I cheated. I saw this video before, and it's actually a really good swing. So you can see why this is a 2 handicap. So let's talk about why a 2 handicap is a 2 handicap. Handicapped to me is all about your misses. You can't be a 2 handicap when you miss it in the pool on the first hole on the right side, and then you rope hook it into the park on number 2. That's just too big of a dispersion. So if you want to limit your handicaps, you have to look at your ball striking first. Then you have to take statistics to figure out what your weaknesses are. It could be putting, chipping, bunker play, up and downs. It could be 80 yards in, whatever it is. Find that weakness and make it your strength. And just keep finding your weaknesses, make it your strength. It's almost a full-time job. That's why most college kids, when they play, they get down to a scratch. Collegiate players, and then they make the decision to go tour level, but most of them don't because it's very hard. And then they become like me, middle-aged, overweight, thinking about the past good times and playing to like a 10. That's the journeyman. But let's take a look at what creates a good swing. And just what we talked about, Landry, is your setup. So we're going to look at the key things, right? We've got the back brace line. Whoa, that line's way too big. We got the back brace line here. We got the lower plane line. We got the upper plane line. And we see a nice size area to play with. You don't want it to be too big, and you don't want it to be tight, because that's for the average golfer. We need that nice middle ground. And we got the plane. It's going to be the spine angle. And yes, it has to be Barney Purple for this to work. And then lastly, we got to look at that centeredness check. So this is a great camera angle. So if you ever do send me videos, please try and take it with the foot line, because if you take it where the ball line is, it's hard to see where your centeredness is. And yes, there is a little bit of science to this, unfortunately, but it does help a lot. And there's that centeredness check. So you can tell already this is a very fundamentally sound setup. Look at the arm hang, how it's parallel with the centeredness hang. So everything is just linear and ready to go. Not to say I'm a linear player. My swing is not even close to anything like this, and I made it work. So there are outliers. So just because you're watching this doesn't mean it has to be this way, but at least this way is like a blueprint to see what's going on in your swing and what changes need to occur. But we take that club back and we can see right away, look at the club head going down that lower plane line, hands going right to that center point. I personally would like to see them stay on that lower plane line a little bit longer. Now, remember, I'm talking to a 2 handicap here. Most of us, I'd be doing cartwheels, giving you guys high fives if you can get that. But he wants to learn how to hit it a little bit more consistent. Anything helps. So a little bit lower. Now, this could also come down to your arm length. So if you have a shorter arm length than your torso, it will affect this. So without me knowing his arm length, keep that in mind too. He might have short arms, which will pull his hands a little higher. So I'm just going at this as just a vision, giving him something to think about. And you can see that the shoulders do slightly pull up as well. At this point, they should still be perpendicular to that pink line. And by lowering that left shoulder, naturally it's going to lower your hands to keep them just a little bit on plane. And it's important because if you look at the really good golfers, once they've matched up, once this is matched up here, then typically they start to go up. And we can see that his goes up, but it's not necessarily straight up. It's in a angle. The really good ball strikers, I've just noticed that once they've reached that center point, once everything's kind of reached there, they naturally go steeper and up because that just makes sure that you are turning to your fullest potential. So I think that looking at this, I might see a little turn issue specifically with the hips, and we'll see it from the face on because if he can get his hips to turn more, that's going to pull his hands back anyway, and his left shoulder down slightly. That's going to keep him on that line to that perfect little star right there. Once he's reached there, that means his hands are still in line with his chest. He's enacted the best amount of turn that he possibly can with his body. And then that's point. Now the arms just go and get triggered up to the top. No more turn. So once you get to that halfway point, you should be turned completely. Then your hands go straight up. Once they're at the top, now it becomes a game of, okay, let me drop it back down and turn through. So you turn first, hands go up. On the way down, now it's sequencing. Some people get their hands to go first. Some people get their body to go first. It really depends on where you're at the top. So we see he gets that top, and we see he just about gets to that centerness. So we see a little bit of suffering there. We also see the hands not quite getting high enough, and that's because the shoulder tilt has also come up. Now, it might have come up because of some weight distribution issues that we might see on the face on. So that's why it's important to send me both down line and face on. And we can see that the hips are not quite, there might be a hip tilt issue. You'll have to look at the front to see that. But let's take a look on the way down. We see that he is a very, very typical good player. And what we talked about, remember those little triangles that we drew, right? So we see, now let's look at this one. So that's the center. So naturally, just by this setup and at this top position, watch his hand path. Remember what I talked about, good players scratch to single digits, they go right down that line. So see how they're going down the line? Right about there, they start to veer out. And that's okay because they have to veer out eventually. They can't just keep going down. We're looking at it from the top of the triangle to basically where that purple line is. They're right on track. Now, if he was a quote-unquote tour player, we might see them drop a little bit, but we also might see them a little bit higher too to allow them to drop a little bit. So all things considered, this is a really good swing because we see it's already down in the slot. It's very much to that lower plane line, and he comes on through. He keeps that club face above the plane, which is very important. If your club face veers too down, you're going to have some contact issues. You're going to hit it heavy. You're going to get your hands involved, and you're also going to have to compensate because you might have to straighten or move your spine around. So that could be another issue too, but he does a great job. He comes on through, beautiful contact. Look at this position here. And remember what we talked about based on the video of the 10 wildest swings. What do they share in common? Look at that picture right there. We have an identical posture past the impact than we had at setup. So we see the spine angle hasn't moved. We see that back brace line hasn't moved. We see a good amount of weight distribution going back left heel. We see the shoulder tilt is tilting correctly. And let's go look at his numbers real quick. Let's look at these shoulder tilt numbers. And we're going to have to see because these arms kind of cover where that shoulder is. So the shoulder is about here. So let me put that mark. Let me get my trusty high-tech Lion Golf Academy. There we go. And let's go down to just past impact here. And let's see how much shoulder tilt he's able to get. So yeah, there's that 20 degrees. So that's really good. So all his numbers are really good. And you can see this is a 2 handicap. I mean, there's very little that's going wrong here. Now for him to challenge himself to get, I don't know if he wants to get better than a 2. It just sounds like he wants to hit the ball better. So sometimes if you hit the ball better, it doesn't mean you're going to go from a 2 to a +2. It just means you're going to hit the ball better. But let's take a look at the face on. And let's see some things here. Now, he does have a forward press. It's not something I would recommend for the average golfer. Clearly, this man isn't an average golfer because he's only played 15 years. And I say only because it takes quite a long time to become a scratch, specifically if you haven't taken lessons, if you have kids. I mean, this guy sounds like he's a phenom, which is great to look at. So one of the things I do see from this face on, and this is maybe what's causing that hip rotation issue. Let me make this line bigger now, is watch the right hip. So as he takes that club back, because he's got this forward press, because you can see a majority of his weight is on this left foot because he's enacting that forward press. So he doesn't necessarily forward press by tilting. I've seen people tilt to forward press or turning to get those hands ahead to forward press. He's leaning to get that forward press. So now he has to get that weight taken care of, because if he doesn't get it taken care of, he's going to have a stack and tilty motion, very upright, and it might not be good for his body. So as an athlete, he's figured this out. So that first move, you see all that weight move from the right hip over. Right now, when you start to move your weight initially this way, it sacrifices some initial turn. And so at the top of his swing, we see that his hands they do a great job of getting out in front of his chest, but the hip tilt, you see that hip tilt is a little bit too far down because this knee is buckled in. And we see this hit, it's almost like you can see this right hip, excuse me, this right knee has a little bow going on. So I think there's some issues with his weight distribution. I think there's too much issue. If he had a weight plate, he'd probably see his weighting on the outside of that right foot as opposed to the inside of the right foot. And if you get it on the inside of the right foot, now you can push, now you can jump. Because if it's on the outside, yeah, you can jump, but you'd have to roll it first and then jump. So that rolling first and jumping could cause some issues. And he sees this every now and then. He sees the slices. He does see some contact issues. So when you're dealing with somebody this good, it's about a game of millimeters for them. You know, if this is a newer player, you just have to kind of get them within a certain mold and have them develop. So this is a developed player already. So take this with a grain of salt. Where if this is you watching me, Philip. So as we come on in, we can see now he shifts his weight back to where it was, and he does a great job because this is where he is, and he stays there at impact. And this is where he started, and we can see where he started was right there. So he does a really good job of compensating for that swing. So I'm very curious if he can do this on a routine basis. Anytime you have a lateral slide, you have to be very, very good with the feel and the timing to count that lateral slide correctly. So I don't know how he hit this golf ball, but I would imagine every now and then he might do it too much or he might not do it enough, and that could cause some issues too. We see not a lot of weight drive in terms of pushing. We see the right knee kind of just rolling through and buckling, and that's usually a sign where somebody doesn't correctly load because it starts on the outside of the right side, and as he pulls it back to the inside, instead of pushing to that outside left heel, he's kind of just rolling back over. But he does a really good job, though, of keeping his hands out in front of his chest right at impact. And then past impact, we can see this nice long extension. This is still out in front of his chest. He has a beautiful triangle here. So there's a lot of good things that he does. But you do see some disconnection at the top of his swing, and specifically here. So we can see if we draw that triangle, if we just draw where the center of that triangle is, we can see how far back his hands are. So there is some disconnection, specifically from the top of the swing as he starts to unwind and drive. That unwinding and driving left pulls his hands back out of his posture. Now he has to do a little bit of this throwing to kind of get those hands back out in front. So we see the hands right here to start to outrace the turn to try and catch up. And he does a good job. So there's a couple of things here. And I'm not going to do this to him. I'm not going to tell him what to change because let me play this while I talk. Let me get some coffee real quick. Anybody know who this is? I'm not going to tell him what to change because that's not being fair to him. I'm not going to tell a 2 handicap to start changing things in his setup, in his motions. I'm just showing this to him, and he needs to decide on what to do because I don't want to take ownership of destroying this swing because it's one of those things where if I change a ball position, I change a little bit here, a little bit, his swing's going to fall apart. There's a reason he's a 2 handicap at the swing. He makes it work. He makes it work well enough, but I'm not going to go and start advising stuff to him. So, Philip, I hope you take my information for what it is, just a pure cause and effect educational video. If you wanted to try some of these things, you can always reach out to me in email. I can help kind of diagnose a couple of things that I would be working on with you. But it's hard because you're one of those students where I have to be there to help you get the feel. And I don't want to send you on a path where you're just going to not like golf. But overall, you got a great swing. Keep it up. Maybe have 3 or 4 kids. You might be like a 4 handicap. Hope that helps you. Let's see who's next. And I think this one. Let's pull up this one. All right. Let's do double feature. All right. So for those of you who joined a couple weeks ago, the man of the hour here. LJ, is this you? I'm pretty sure. Okay, so we're gonna watch this, and we're gonna see what we talked about and what we changed. Now he went and practiced for a good couple of weeks, and we're gonna see what happens. And if I remember correctly, he's a 5 handicap, 6'7", if I remember. So very big man. Use his body as best as he could. And what we had him work on was some setup changes, learning to swing the ball more up on his driver and not rely on his hands and arms, and work on his tilting issues. And let's take a look. So we're going to pull up one of these. Perfect. And let's align them so they're both at impact. And hopefully, sometimes this computer just decides to shut down when I do this. So let's just pray. And if it does shut down, give me 5 minutes. I'll be back on. Okay, this is the moment of truth. Okay, good. All right. 6'5", 5 handicap. There you go. Sorry, I thought you were 6'7". Either way, big man. All right, 5 handicap. Let's take a look at impact. Let's see if we can notice the differences. So left is the new, right is the old. Now, originally, let's look at the setup and see what we see the changes are. So there's definitely more spacing between his feet and the club head. In terms of the angles, it does look like the one on the right side is a little bit more hunched over, which we try to get away from. So this is a good thing. I don't know why I can't move. It won't let me scroll up. I don't want to crash my computer, so we're just going to leave it. Let's take a look. And sorry, I'm going quiet. I'm in my analysis mode here. Okay, so take a look. There's definitely some changes here. And the biggest change, I think, will come from kind of saving yourself a little bit here. And we can see already, this is kind of what we had you monitor. Okay, so we do see a change already. So there's 30 degrees, 38 degrees. Let's take a look at impact to see if we maintained it. Just past impact on this one. Okay, so ballpark 23 degrees and okay, 24. So you're doing the same tilting, which is good, but we see we've leveled it out. So this is much better for your back, quite honestly. So good job with this. And I see there is less of you trying to stay down just past impact. I still see there's a little bit of it. And what we talked about was the reason he had to kind of lunge forward was to keep his hand speed up and trying to reach out for that golf ball. But what you'll notice is, it's very hard to tell the difference. And this is one of those things where it's probably frustrating to look at, is when you put in a bunch of work and you expect your swing to look, man, vastly different. But when you slow it down, you take a look at these tiny little idiosyncrasies of the golf swing. And we can see the same framework. We see the same hand position. We see the same sequencing. You see that left foot. The left foot goes down the exact same time. We see everything moving the same way. We do see some slight changes, which is good. Club face position is about the same. We see this club face slightly behind the hands. Here it's not as far behind the hands, but it could be a camera issue too. So we have to kind of keep that in mind as well, is the camera angles. But we do see less hand manipulation past impact, and the hand path escape pattern is definitely higher. So we're looking at this distance between here. Why is that on an angle? So we look at the difference between hips and hands versus hips and hands. We see it's slightly less on the right side, which is a good thing, which means the hand path issue is taking effect naturally. Yeah, I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of reps. Now, keep in mind, remember how many reps it took you to get to your position now. If you've been playing, let's just say you take a person that's playing for 30 years, and let's say they hit a bucket of balls a week, right, which is about average. So what is that? 5,200 golf balls in a year, 100 balls a week. Multiply that by 30 years, you're looking at 150,000 golf ball swings. Now, it says it takes about three 3,000 repetitions to create a new habit. But we also forget, depends how deep that habit has been ingrained. If I take somebody that's never picked up the club and I give them 3,000 reps, they're going to have a new habit like this pretty easily. But if I give you 3,000 reps, we're not going to notice much. You're going to notice these tiny things. That's why I'm pointing out these tiny changes to you to give you some hope. Because when you look at this, you already go, man, they look identical, but they're not identical. We do see some changes. So I think your practice routines is much better. Hopefully your ball striking is improved. Can you just let us know if you have seen some improvements, or if your misses are getting a little bit different? I noticed your divots are a little bit different too, the way they're pointing. So I do see some good things. So keep on it. But going back to the repetitions, think about this. Tiger. Now I'll use this example. Now we're not Tiger, but I use this example. Tiger Woods changed his swing in the mid 2000s. He wanted to eliminate, 6 or 7 inches at the top of his swing. And it probably took him a good 18 months to do so. And he probably hit thousands of balls a day. My ball striking is much, much better. Tight draw is not good. That's good to hear. That's the bottom line. Obviously, they might look the same, but we see the changes and keep it up. So if Tiger takes that amount of time hitting that many golf balls, how long do you think it takes you to do that? But now it's a double-edged sword. Tiger needs that long because he has been playing since he was 2 and probably hit 1 million golf balls. There's not many people in the world that have hit 1 million golf balls, but I would imagine Tiger is one of those people. So any changes that Tiger has to do, he has to do so much more work. So I would imagine you have been playing for a long time, if I remember correctly, and you love to play. So when you love to play, things get a little squirrely, and you also practice too. So we talked a couple of weeks ago about how to practice correctly, take your time, use many dry swings, and hopefully you've stuck with that routine and we see some changes. Now, if we take a look at the face on, let's see the face on. Okay, yeah, there's definitely some improvements here. How do you like that ball position change? Is that hard to do? That's one of the hardest things, that ball position change. Not as much forward press, which is good. I would challenge you one more time here. If you really want to see some changes. Okay, this one's going to be tougher because it involves you stretching. It involves you getting to be able to hold your posture. So if we take a look at both of these, right in that midway point, right from here, look at the one on the left. So we're going to draw where your head is. And then as we keep going, see how the head comes up? And then also that will bring your shoulders slightly up. And you might lose a little bit of your spine angle. So right there, we're on a new spine angle. So there's your new spine angle. And then there is your old spine angle. So if you want to see even better results, is you've got to figure out a way to let that left shoulder remain perpendicular to your spine angle. And right about here, you're doing a good job. Left shoulder is staying perpendicular. Awesome. Right here, when you get those hands to go higher, that's when you lose your posture. And we can see that you have to lift your left foot up. And that's usually a sign that you have to give way to allow that to happen. And maybe, I don't know if you sit a lot. I don't know if you, in today's age, we sit a lot. I sit on the computer all day. I drive cars. My back of my legs are not used to being stretched out. And typically, your hamstrings are the first thing to hold your swing in place, or the first thing if they're not flexible enough to let your swing go. So it seems like to me there might be a little hamstring issue. So if you want to do some hamstring stretches, all we're looking for here is to continue that left shoulder to go down instead of up. Now, this will do a couple things. It will eliminate a lot of this at the top of your swing. So right here, you see on the left side, you've already turned to your max. All this is, in my opinion, just fluff to try and get that club back to a little further. We don't really need all this because all of this has to be reconnected somehow down to the golf ball in a third of the time. So now we have to get our hands a little bit more involved than they need to be. You do a good job, and you seem to have really good timing. But could you imagine if you can get your swing to stop right there? I mean, that would be awesome, because now your hands are still in front of their chest. They're still connected. And from here, if you just, turn and tilt, you're going to start striping the ball even better. So my next goal for you is do yourself a favor and just stop the swing there and it'll try to eliminate some of this. You don't have to eliminate all of it, maybe half of that. So maybe stop the swing there. Let's start with 2 frames every 2 weeks. Okay, 2 frames, 2 weeks. Does my head raise because I have too little tilt from the left side? No, I don't think you do. You do a really good job of maintaining your tilt. I just think it's a flexion issue. So there, we all reach a point in our golf swing, depending on age, ability, flexion, where we can hold our posture. Here you are holding your posture. You are probably going to hold your posture from this point through impact. You look like your weight's distributed correctly. You look like you're over the golf ball. Your hands in front of your chest. Things will unwind a little bit more naturally. Here, you're getting a little out of your posture. Your weight distribution kind of shifts a little bit. Your left foot has to come up to alleviate some pressure. Your arms get pulled away from the center of your chest far enough so where they could create some havoc on your redirection. Now, your redirection happens. That seems like it's so short a swing. Yes, I know it does. Just remember the length of the swing is dictated by your turn, not necessarily where the arms go to. There's a long arm swing and a long turn swing. So if you look at the best in the world, let me see if I can find somebody here. I wonder if I have anybody. Give me a sec. Let me see if I have got so many videos here. I got to find somebody. Okay. How about this guy? You know this guy? Okay. So right here, this is his full turn. Now remember, this is a guy that wants to hit the ball much further than anybody. And he's doing a really good job doing it. It's probably not a good thing to show this to you because he's such an outlier. So if you can get your body to be here, that's what we want. Take a look at what happens when he starts to get more turn. What happens to his left leg? It has to come up to allow that turn to occur. Now he's deciding to do that, but what he's not doing is he's not sacrificing his tilting. His tilting's still able to stay compensatory to his initial shoulders. So his shoulders are tilting around his spine. They're not leveling out, flattening out. And you see his head doesn't necessarily come up. It actually goes down because as he's turning, he's maintaining his tilt, which pulls his head down. So you do the other way. You get that left leg up and you start standing up because there's an inefficient flexion issue. So I'm thinking it's the back of your hamstrings or your lower back issue or just this area right here. A lot of the times we get tight here, we can't elongate this. So I think it's more of a issue with your body. And we take a look and from here to here, even Bryson. So how much extra arm motion does he have? He has quite a bit of arm motion. But take a look as he gets down to the impact. Right here, he's already pulled his hands down. So his hands go down. And from this point, his arms have to catch up. But take a look at his shoulders. His shoulders and body never stop turning. They completely stop turning. They start catching up after impact. So as he strikes the golf ball, look, his hands are on the right side of his body. They're not in line with the center, where amateurs need to be more in line with the center because we don't have this flicking out around through. Makes sense. I need more stretching. Yeah, we all need more stretching. I need more stretching. I'm sitting here preaching to you guys stretch. I don't stretch, and I feel it. Let me see. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Let me see one more here. Okay, let's look at Jim. All right, let's take a look at his body rotation. So Jim's turning. Right there is where he stops. But look how Jim has to flick back around. I mean, look at that. There's no way we as average amateurs can do this motion. But if you take a look at that tilting, right? So here he is there. Let's go to the top of his swing here. Boom. So his tilt is still relative. Now for us, as soon as you get to that point, as soon as you start seeing your shoulders raise up. So for him, his left shoulder doesn't necessarily come up. Look at that. He's still in that tilt. So as long as you don't sacrifice your tilt and you remain in your posture, your arms can do what they want. It comes down to your natural tendencies. LJ presses off the ground his left foot, which raises his head and affects his shoulders. Bryson may have a similar shape with his front leg, but it raises his heels. Yeah, you got it. That's correct. His head and spine angles stay put. You got it. And so same with Furyk. I mean, you take a look at that. His His spine angle's there, his shoulders are there, they haven't changed. And now he can just basically reroute like he needs to. And man, he does such a great job. It's no wonder he became so dominant in this game. And even here, so he's still against his back brace line, still in his spine angle. So you have to look, LJ, you have to look at what you are sacrificing by coming out of your posture. And if you are sacrificing positions to try to get, let's just watch him in the background. He's got a cool swing to watch. If you are sacrificing positions to try and get length of arc, to me, that doesn't make as much sense, because positions will always create consistent power. Length of arc can create immense power, but if you sacrifice your positions in terms of your shoulder tilt or your spine angle, then all of a sudden you won't get consistent distance. You're going to have some bad shots. You're going to, you can hit an 8-iron 160 and then hit next one 140 because you're not staying consistent. Your hands and arms need a consistent base. And as long as that base is consistent, they will learn to do whatever they want. And here's Jim Furyk. He learned to do whatever he wanted, but he needed that basis. He needed that thing to not move. So I hope that makes sense to you. But overall, I think you did make some improvements in that short time. 2 weeks is a very short time. So you did put the work in. Keep putting that work in, because that's what you need. But you have to look at small, tiny little victories. So my next challenge to you, LJ, is you've got to get your hands a little bit out of it on the backswing. And that will not sacrifice your positions. Your number one priority is maintaining your spine angle at the top of your swing, which will then allow your shoulder tilt to maintain their levels. And then you can learn to figure it out. Now, keep in mind, two things can happen. Two things can happen when you do this. You'll either stripe it or you'll lose 40 yards. Don't let either one of those sell you on it. Okay, or deter you on it. I've had students that make that change and they stripe it right away, but then they start to creep back into their old habits. And that's where that's constant videoing yourself. The one that loses 40 yards, you have to think about why you probably might lose 40 yards like this, is because your hands are in a totally different position. They have to learn how to hold their hinge correctly while they now trust the body to turn and make up for that hand speed. So you have to get your hands more connected with the body. So as long as your hands are connected, think about this. Think about the Ferris wheel at Disneyland. The power doesn't come from the outside of the Ferris wheel. The power comes from the inside of the Ferris wheel. Now, revolutions per minute, they're spinning at the same rate, right? The inside spinning the same as the outside, unless they're connected by noodles. The goal for you is to have this vision that your hands are staying connected to your chest. They're the outside. They're the carriage. That's where you sit. The wider you can get those hands away from the center of your hub, the faster in miles per hour they move, but they don't change revolutions. So they'll still keep up with the revolutions, but they increase their hand speed because they're wider. And how do we get width? We don't break our arms back over here. Once you break your arms back to secretly gain length, you destroy your width. Width is always more powerful than length. And don't clip that and use that for something else. Okay, I got a wife. You can save that for another show. But yes, width is always more important than length. I'll leave it off with that. Hopefully that helps you guys. Thanks for the support. If you do like this, hit that like, share, subscribe. Really helps us grow. Thanks for watching the videos every week. I'm going to plan to put on a couple more out there. If you do have a video, please submit it to me. I will do my best to include it on next week's. I try to get everybody's in there. And eventually, hopefully, we'll have enough where I can do this twice a week and keep growing. So if you know anybody that needs some help, send them my way. Appreciate your support. Hope that helps you. And LJ, yeah, I know. All right, my friends. Go Dodgers. See you later.